Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. It's the Hurling Power Rankings. We did the Football Power Rankings a week ago, and today we're going to be doing the Hurling Power Rankings. We're going to be ranking the 17 best counties in the sport of hurling right now. In a similar way to the Football Power Rankings, these will be based off of who are the best counties right now at hurling. So it's not necessarily based off of current form or recent results or form of this season. It's just based off overall who do we think is the better team. And obviously you're factoring in last season, the championship, who's winning all Irelands, who's winning major trophies and everything else. We're only doing 17 counties because of the fact that I think if we went below like Division 2, sort of below the Joe McDonough, I think I'm not too sure. I know certainly I don't have the knowledge really below Division 2. I don't know, maybe Matthew does, but I think going below Joe McDonough and everything else will be a little bit of too much of a waffle. But do let us know, like anyone watching, if there is any county sort of on the rise that maybe we haven't discussed, and we'd be happy to mention them. Matthew, I suppose we did the Football Power Rankings, which definitely went down well last week. So Hurling Power Rankings, are you looking forward to it?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on again, Aaron. Yeah. The football ones, a few disagreements I could see in the comments, a few Mayo people going on about kind of titles and things like that, and they were saying that they've won, I think it was 8 kind of titles since 2011, but in fact they've won 7, so they actually got the stat wrong there. So it was very, very debatable with the football power rankings, but I don't think the hurling will be as debatable. And to be honest with you, I'd be kind of the same as you. I wouldn't go down 17 or lower personally. I'm trying to get a bit of an education on it. I've done a few things on Instagram doing like who scored what and things after Fermanagh, Mayo, all them counties. I'm trying my best at it. But ultimately, they're just not showing enough, Aaron. And that's not either of us' fault, really. I know the Loud player Peter Fortune was on League Sunday on Sunday night and spoke very well in fairness. And he was speaking about having an All Ireland in his backyard and winning All Ireland titles, and he dream of that even as a Loud player. And the fact that Loud only have 3 clubs in hurling, I think hurling needs to grow more up and down the country. Like even look at Mayo, for example, for Mana, Dave some excellent players like Luca Bacuska, for example. The interview that Owen Sheehan did about Joe Baldwin as well was absolutely brilliant and off the ball. Check it out if you haven't already. And hopefully those counties get more of a recognition in future years than they are doing right now. And I think Seamus Brady made a very good point, and I think the podcast that we did on Sunday evening, coincidentally, same time as League Sunday, he said that if the GA or RT or TGR are not going to show Christy Ring, Nicky Rackard, Laurie Marr, whatever games, those will be whatever the big games are. Why can't streaming services like Stream Sport or Clubber step in here? Why can't they show a few games just to give a bit of education around these counties? And I think that's what's needed in future years. But yeah, there was a long discussion about the future hurling. I think Joe Fortune as well from Westmeath, the Westmeath manager, spoke very well as well. Kind of disappointed there was only a 10-minute segment or in and around that. Kind of disappointed as well that Ursula Jacob and Liam Sheedy actually spoke a bit about it. Like they're from Tipperary and Wexford. With all due respect, I don't think they realise the severity of the issue in counties like Louth and Westmeath or Cavan or Fermanagh or them hurling counties. So I would have expected RT to do a bit more on that. And Joanne Cantwell was even saying that they don't have time on this, but they did have time on the programme. But I'd be wondering, could they provide a segment on the RTGA podcast during the week for this sort of discussion? That would be absolutely brilliant. It would give more time for the fans to digest it. And the stark reality is people don't tend to watch TV anymore. They watch certain clips on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. And I think they'd be great sound bites really to explain the severity around the decline of hurling. But looking forward to discussing the rankings with you. But it's a shame we can't go 17 or lower. But look, hopefully with the more coverage in more years to come, we might be able to do so in 2-3 years' time.
Yeah, and I actually just realised there was one county that I forgot. So there is actually 18. So it's 18 to 1 will be the prediction. Poor Westmeath. I completely forgot about them, to be honest with you. So there we go. Any Westmeath fans watching can certainly give me grief. A family from Westmeath, in fairness. But yeah, so we'll crack on anyway. And this is 17 to 11. We'll include Westmeath in here as well. As I said, I did forget Westmeath, so it'll be more sort of 18 to 11 as such. I mean, looking at that, Kildare 17, Meath 16, Kerry 15, Down 14, Laois 13, Offaly 12, Carlow 11. Like, any disagreements with them, first of all?
Maybe one, I think, from Kildare to Laois, I definitely agree with you. Just for clarity, Aaron, where are you putting Westmeath here?
I was thinking Westmeath would probably be 11, and then you'd push all the rest of them back. That's probably what I'd go for, yeah.
Okay. So I'd switch around one switch. I'll go Offaly switching with Carlow. I know Carlow beat them last year, but Offaly have such a good team at the moment. Charlie Mitchell, Adam Screeney, Killian Kiley played very well the other day, and they showed that they can mix them with Wexford now the other week, and they do have very good young players. And maybe if a bit of luck went Offaly in the Joe McDonagh final, I think Offaly could have won that game. Carlow just had the better performance on the day and got over the line. Fair play to them. They start the league very well, in fairness. John Michael Nolan's having good performances. They've won 2 games out of 2 in Division 2A. So good performances at the start of the league for Carlow. Good performances for Offaly too. You have to remember against Waterford, I think they had the man sent off. That kind of derailed them a small bit. Against Wexford on any other day, they could have won that game. So for me, I'd switch Offaly and Carlow. I'd still have Westmeath above them 2 counties, but I think generally that's probably a good enough ranking. You looked at the other counties there, Kildare, Meath. I'd probably put Kildare 18 the same as you. I think they did very well last year, but they have struggled in the league thus far. Brian Dowling, the Kilkenny Camogie manager from last year, has actually gone in. So it should be a good appointment for Kildare, but I think they've lost to Meath in the first one of the first 2 games in the league. They lost to Laois now the other week as well. And Meath have some good players. Saoirse Bolton in charge there. Like Jack Regan, obviously, is a good player. Nicky Potterton, like they do have some decent players. Kerry, apparently, a lot of Kerry players aren't planning to play for the county this year, which is a huge shame. I don't know what's the story with Fiona McKessie. Is he actually playing with the Kerry team? Is he taking time out? Because I heard rumours that if the footballers came calling, he'd actually play football, which was kind of a damning statement in terms of the future of Kerry hurling, really. But I probably would agree with John Kildare, Meath, and Kerry. Laois as well. Like Laois are an interesting one. Even look at the team that they have at the moment. Aaron Dunphy, Willie Dunphy, Paddy Purcell are all still there, still knocking about. You've Jason Duggan, James Duggan, should I say, the full forward, who's a very good under 20 in recent seasons. He's gone into the Laois senior team now. Liam Senior, cornerback. They do have some good players, but it's about gelling them all together. And they have some good club teams as well. They struggled a bit in the Joe McDonagh last season, and that's probably why they're below the likes of Offaly, Carlow, Westmeath, and all them. But Laois definitely have potential to go up further the rankings. And Westmeath, I think Westmeath had a very good performance now the last day against Limerick. I know they lost by 6 points, mainly down to the fact that Donegal Dalek scored 1-4 from play for Limerick that day. But Westmeath produced a brilliant performance, and they showed that they can mix with the big boys, even beating Wexford last year. They were very, very unlucky to go down to the Joe McDonagh Cup. But I said this to Seamus Brady on his podcast during the week as well, that the Joe McDonagh Cup is going to be a bear pit this year, because you have the likes of Westmeath in there, you have Offaly, you have Laois, you have Meath and Kerry, who are decent teams on their day as well. Down has some decent players like Pierce Oak McCrickard. Obviously, Ronan Sheehan's a good coach there as well. Paul Sheehan's a good free taker. So there are some very good teams in the Joe McDonagh. You'd have to probably lean towards Offaly, Laois, and Westmeath, probably be the top 3 there. But even those 3 sides, very, very difficult to separate them. But yeah, I genuinely agree with all them rankings. I've just switched one Offaly ahead of Carlow.
Yeah, so we have the updated graphic on here with Westmeath added in there. So we made a bit of a late change there. But yeah, like, is there an argument maybe that Offaly, like, especially when you look at Offaly's draw with Wexford at the weekend, obviously Carlow coming through to Joe McDonagh, like the main reason being why I had Carlow ahead was because of that Joe McDonagh win. But at the same time, when you look at Offaly's underage success, I think there is certainly an argument that they are closing the door a little bit. But like, obviously, it's no surprise when we get onto the next list. Like, you have Antrim and 10th, but like, is there an argument that Carlow, Offaly, and even Westmeath, to a certain extent, are maybe closing the gap on the likes of Antrim, Dublin, and maybe even Wexford to a certain extent?
Maybe so, especially Antrim when you think about it. I know they were very close to beating Dublin now the other day, and it was a lucky goal that got over the line for Dublin in Cork and Park. But Antrim have lost a load of players this year. Keelan Malloy is a huge loss in midfield. Neil McManus on the forward line is a big loss. They do have players coming through the ranks like Joe McLaughlin from Rory O'Cushendall. I'm really looking forward to see how he progresses this season. I think he scored 10 goals at the club championship, which was an insane record across the Antrim Championship Ulster and the All-Ireland game against O'Loughlin Gales. So him at full forward would be very, very interesting to see. Noel McKenna, who's on my podcast previously, is a very good hurler as well, a wing forward. Owen Campbell's good as well. So they do have good players around them, and Darren Gleeson's a good coach there as well. You could argue Westmeath above Antrim, but like Antrim beat Westmeath pretty handily in the championship last year. Let's not forget. I know Westmeath beat Wexford, but ultimately, it was unlucky. But they that game kind of meant nothing in a way. But look, like Offaly, Carlow, I definitely give them a hope of them overtaking the likes of Antrim. Like Carlow, I don't think they'll go down without a fight. Like a lot of people might predict that Carlow will be going back down straight to the Joe McDonagh Cup. If they could get a few results against the Dublins, against the Antrims, I think they have a huge chance. Wexford as well. You've seen Wexford's record against these so-called smaller counties. Against the bigger counties like Kilkenny, Galway, they raised their game. But then against the smaller counties, they're really, really poor. Like against Offaly now the other day, I know, granted, 2 red cards, but against Westmeath was a prime example last year. And then in the final game, they somehow beat Kilkenny. So Wexford are just an unknown commodity in many ways. Maybe that will change under Keith Rossiter. But I think Carlow might target those games in particular. I think Kilkenny and Galway, they might lax off a bit, maybe not get beat too handsomely, if that's kind of a fair assessment, because Galway and Kilkenny are way ahead of those counties, no disrespect. But in terms of Wexford, Dublin, Antrim, I think Carlow will be targeting those games. And they do have the players. Like Martin Cavan is an excellent player who's on my podcast as well. Chris Nolan, John Michael Nolan, Fiacre Fitzpatrick is their midfielder. There are some very good players in Carlow, and they showed last year with that grit and determination of beating Offaly that they could beat anyone. So I think Carlow could have a very good campaign in the Leinster Championship, considering they've won 2 games out of 2 in Division 2A. They've done their utmost for now. And yeah, I think they could be a threat in general. I think Westmeath coming up to Antrim, I think it's well documented at this stage. They do have good players. They have good coaching, Joe Fortune. Noel Mitchell's good, Kieran. I'll be interested to see the Doyles actually in Killian and Kieran. Will they actually play for Westmeath this year? Darry Egerton is a very good defender. So, like, Westmeath, they do have some good players, but the key for them is to just get out of the Joe McDonagh, get out of that bear pit. And for Offaly, they do have some very good young players. There's well documented underage success in Offaly. And like Cork were just the better team on the day against Offaly, but even for Offaly to get to the final in under 20 level last year was just a superb achievement. And what I will say before we get on to the bigger counties are, it was great to see Adam Screeney play last Saturday. I really would absolutely love to see more of him in the All-Ireland Championship. He's just that type of player. He's so exciting to watch. He's just a breath of fresh air in hurling. He's just a brilliant player. He has the potential to be one of the greats in hurling. I know it's early. He's only 19 years of age. He's not even on the UL Fitzgibbon panel this year. I think UL, in particular, the Fitzgibbon Cup, are trying to ease him in a small bit in those sorts of competitions, not rush him in too much. I know Offaly are doing it, but that's a kind of a different situation. Offaly don't necessarily have the talents up through the ranks like an Adam Screening, whereas UL do, like Howard O'Connor, Adam English, and all them in Fitzgibbon level. So I get why Offaly are rushing him in for the league, but it was just great to see him play last Saturday against Wexford, and really looking forward to seeing him and what he does in the next few years.
Absolutely, yeah, no, and that's the thing with Offaly, like they've got a lot of good underage players coming through at the minute, and I do think there's a good potential for Offaly to be bridging the gap. And I know Wexford were down to 13 men in that game against Offaly at the weekend, but I think Offaly still showed like loads and loads of quality in that game, in fairness. ATU says, did you see the interview the Fermanagh hurling manager did? Brilliant stuff. Yeah, like quite an incredible story, really. Like in terms of, I think, like, was he saying that he nearly had that he had a stroke prior to a league game against Leitrim? So yeah, like just like crazy stuff, really. And thank God he's all good and he's all okay. But yeah, that was a bit of a crazy story.
And the thing was as well, and I might be corrected on this, I think it was during COVID when, or even after that, when people were kind of getting down, and he was saying that he was, really, really down at some point in his life. This is not regarding JNO, but this is general life itself. He was down, but the thing that actually got him through day by day was hurling, and that probably epitomises what it means to the smaller counties, to the likes of Fermanagh, the likes of Leitrim, and even Fermanagh winning at the weekend. It's just a brilliant for them, and even Owen Sheehan to go down to Ballinamore that day. I think it was just brilliant, and it just shows the media need to do that more. They need to go to these grounds. They need to get more educated on these sorts of players. And while I will say an interview conducted by a good friend of ours, obviously Seamus Brady, I know Cliff, check this interview if you haven't already with Kieran Breslin from Fermanagh. Really, really insightful stuff. And he's a guy that would know more about it than us. So if you want to know more about lower level hurling, go on to Seamus' channel and check that interview out. It's just absolutely brilliant to see that. And even the likes of Monaghan winning the Laurie Marr Cup last year, Meath getting over the line in the Christie Ring, and you had loads of brilliant stories. Like even I write for a newspaper called the West Cork People. It's a once a month newspaper, and I actually did an interview last year during the Alliance League with a London player, Ronan Crowley. He was actually born near where I live in County Cork. He emigrated to London, did a few things in Manchester, and he plays for the London senior hurling team alongside he's one of the best forwards in London at the moment, alongside Jack Goulding from Kerry, who scored 311 at the weekend. So the more we know about these players, the better, and the better coverage that hurling gets. So I just think it was a brilliant story with that, with the Fermanagh manager now the last time. It's just really, really insightful stuff. And the media just need to do that more, just push it more, and hurling will get more exposure than probably it should have over the last few seasons.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think if, as you were saying earlier as well, like I think if even some of the lower level games like were streamed on YouTube, even as an example, or something of that nature, like because, like I wouldn't be against watching, Fermanagh against Monaghan in a hurling game. I think it would actually be quite fascinating to watch it and see and understand more about those kind of players. And that's also one of the reasons why we're not ranking, counties outside the 18 that we've mentioned, because there's just no information, unfortunately, on those counties. Like you can never see highlights on those games. You can never really see information. There's no match reports available. Like very, very little, like in terms of finding out information. So that's kind of the reason, one of the main reasons as well why we haven't been able to include them in our power rankings. We'll crack into the top 10 then. And in 10th, we've got Antrim. 9th is Dublin. 8th is Wexford. Waterford is 7th. Cork is 6th. Any thoughts there?
I'd agree with you from 10 to 7. You could argue you're too hard at Dublin, maybe, Aaron. It's a hard one with Dublin and Wexford, isn't it? Because Wexford raised their game for Kilkenny, Galway, whatever. Dublin kind of lose all those games. But in terms of head-to-head, Dublin wipe Wexford in the last few seasons. So could you argue Dublin above Wexford? I'm not sure. It depends on your outlook, really. Would you depend it more on like challenging the bigger sides or head-to-head records? It's a hard one. It really is. 7th place Waterford, I'd agree with completely. The thing was, I think Austin Gleeson even came out and said it's not just Waterford hurling. He just doesn't enjoy even watching the sport or whatever. I think I read on some Instagram page, Club Gaelic, I think it was, on Instagram. Actually, I didn't have time to read it now, but I think it was Austin Gleeson at Ballpark saying that he had a ticket for a game and he just didn't bother going. So I just think his love is not in the game anymore. And that's just a shame for Waterford hurling, and for hurling in general. He's just an incredible hurler. But even look at the Waterford players like Paddy Levy from Ballygunner midfield, had a very good performance against Clare last weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops this season. The Bennett brothers and Shane and Stephen are very good as well. Mikey Kiley has the potential to grow as well. Sean Walsh is doing well for SETU Waterford in the Fitzgibbon Cup. So is Ruben Halloran. So there are some good players in Waterford, but they need to realise their potential sooner rather than later. And I just don't like the way they played last year, Waterford. It was almost like too defensive. And I don't know, is that Davy having a say in the team? I don't know, is it too many coaches? Like even, it's interesting actually, the background team for Waterford this year. You have Owen Kelly, Tipperary legendary hurler, and you've Donegal O'Callaghan, a former rugby player who's obviously friends with David Jordan's with his family on RTE. So that was an interesting backroom team. But Waterford kind of need to back it up this year. They need to perform this year. They can't just get bottom of the Munster group every time and use that as an excuse on why they haven't progressed and why the Munster knockout has been gone as an excuse for them to fail. They can't use that simply. They have to improve, and there's no doubt about that. In terms of this top six, am I biased here? I'm going to go Cork over Galway. I don't rate Galway. I really don't. I just think, look, for Cork, first of all, I know they've lost to Kilkenny and Clare, but people might not understand this. Darragh Fitzgibbon is not playing at the moment. Kieran Joyce is out of the team. Alan Connolly's out of the team. I don't know, is he going to come back from injury? But if you have them three players back and you move Niall O'Leary to cornerback, I think you have a good structure there. I would agree the pressure wasn't on in the first half against Kilkenny, particularly the first 20 minutes. It was very lackluster. Kilkenny were nearly putting more pressure on us. But the fact that we were missing those three players that I mentioned, particularly Fitzgibbon and Joyce, for those games against Clare and Kilkenny, and we still only lost both those games by minimal margins. And those are two teams that are putting up to Limerick here in your house. So I wouldn't be too down on the Cork hurlers at the moment. I just feel maybe it's a Munster hurling, boys. I think Munster hurling, other than Kilkenny, I think it's miles ahead of Leinster. I'll be honest. I'm just going to be honest here. I just think Leinster hurling, there's not enough, oomph about the games. There's not enough intensity. Whereas Munster hurling, it's battle after battle after battle. And that's the key thing with Munster hurling. Like, other than the Leinster final, you would agree, the Leinster Championship was very poor standard last year. It was really, really poor. Like, even the Kilkenny-Galway group game, the Dublin-Wexford game in Croke Park just lacked a bit of intensity. I know Dublin won that game, but Wexford missed a lot of shots that day, and it was just really poor in the eye. Whereas Munster hurling, I just think it's where it's at the moment, and I think that's where the top five is usually ranked, and I just feel I'd have Galway 6th and Cork 5th, but that's just my honest opinion.
Yeah, like, I think I would certainly have a lot more faith in Cork to have a much better season than Galway. Like, I think Cork overall, come the end of the year, I think will be ranked higher than Galway. I think Cork have way more potential, as you've said before. Like, they have a whole host of players to come back in, new younger lads coming into the side. Like, there's so much depth in Cork, and there's so many options available to Cork, and I think that's what makes them so dangerous. But I think it just goes back to the fact that Galway, when you look at it, got to the All-Ireland semi-finals last season. Obviously, in the last two seasons, one of those years, they obviously beat Cork in the quarterfinals. Albeit, maybe you could argue Cork maybe should have won that game, but Galway obviously came through. And then, like, obviously Cork have lost the opening 2 games of the league as well. So, like, that's just kind of I don't think there's much between Cork and Galway, and I do think, like, if we were to revisit this at the end of the year, I think Cork are ranked above Galway. I'd be fairly confident of that. But I just think right now, I just don't think Cork have done enough just yet. It's a bit like when we were speaking about Donegal in the football power rankings. Like, I don't think Donegal have done enough just yet to justify putting them above certain teams. But I think they're on the way, and I think that's similar with Cork, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a fair point, really. And when you think about the order of the quarterfinals in the last 2 years, it was just like Cork, first of all, and then Tipperary kind of down tools against Galway. I don't know what it was. They just were very, very poor on those days, especially like Cork in 2022. I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but I think it was very, very low shot accuracy, very high wide count. And you just can't do that in all other quarterfinals. And Galway kind of got over the line in those, but I would argue with Galway. Like, again, like, they haven't won a Leinster Championship since 2018. And that's a poor Leinster Championship, let's be honest. It's the Leinster Championship full of poor teams. Like, you see, the Wexford have won it. They won it in 2019. Kilkenny have won 4 on the bounce then. So you can't argue Galway have not fulfilled their potential at all. Granted, they have good players coming through. Gavin Lee, Evan Niall, and Conor Whelan is certainly not a one-trick pony. See that, Jackie Turtle? But he's just, like, Galway do have good players, no doubt about that. But I just question, and Seamus actually questioned on my podcast last year about the appointment of Henry Shefflin. And I was thinking, okay, maybe he could be a bit harsh on this. But then I thought about it even more as the weeks went on and the months went on. And then I'm thinking, have they actually improved under Henry Shefflin? Really? Like, they haven't won an Leinster title. In the granted, against Limerick, they did well in 2022, but in 2023, they were really, really poor in that All-Ireland semi-final. Limerick absolutely rolled over them. And it was just, like, even at the end of the first half, like Henry telling Galway to have one on top, and then Limerick took full advantage at the end of the half. Like, that's just tactical naivety, really. And I just think Galway needs like a homegrown manager really to gain and bounce out of them. Like when you look at like me and Seamus actually went through managers from other counties that haven't done well over the last few seasons, and we counted 3 for Galway: Shane O'Neill, Henry Shefflin, Jordan Nan. That can't be just a coincidence. I don't know why Galway can't go with managers within their own county. It worked to an extent with John McIntyre. It definitely worked under Anthony Cunningham, giving them a bit of confidence. It most certainly worked under Micheál Donoghue. They won the All-Ireland in 2017. And James made this point as well. It was almost like in 2017 they won the All-Ireland. In 2018 they were Joe Canning drop short and beating probably one of the greatest teams we've ever seen. And then in 2019 they had one bad year, losing to Dublin in Parnell Park, and they almost like down tools. We need to go for an outside manager now. And I don't know what actually sparked that. It really boggled the mind, really. And I think Galway, personally, I just think they need to go for an inside manager to develop in the next few seasons. But just be the reason I have Cork and Tipperary above Galway, despite the fact that Galway beat them over the last few seasons, is I don't think Leinster hurling is up to the standard. And the fact that Galway haven't won it since 2018 is a damning statistic.
Yeah, could you argue maybe Galway were a little bit unlucky though last year in the Leinster final, like losing out through that last minute goal that obviously came sort of out of nowhere, and against Limerick as well. Like in the first half, I thought they played very well against Limerick in the first half last year. Fair enough, things went very badly towards the end of the first half and sort of for the majority of the second half. Like I do agree, but I'm just trying to make a case in my head for any Galway fans who are maybe watching. Like, is there a case that maybe they're not that far away? Because they are getting to semi-finals. They have had good results. Like obviously beating Tipperary in the quarterfinals last year was still a great result. I do agree with what you're saying about Leinster. I do think the standard is very poor in Leinster, and it's one of them where like Galway and Kilkenny really don't necessarily actually have to be at their best a lot of the time to get to a Leinster final. Because I think Wexford have been very poor the last few years. Dublin, are not the same team as they were 8-9 years ago. But yeah, because even when you look at Galway, like they do have a lot of great younger players like Tom Monaghan, Evan Nyland, Brian Concannon, I think has been very impressive at times. Like I do think there is potential there. And maybe a new manager might be maybe what they need.
It probably is, yeah. But you could argue in those games to counteract your argument there that in the Kilkenny game, how did they lead them back into the game when they were ahead for a sizable margin, and how Killian Burke scored? It was a brilliant goal by Killian Buckley. Don't take it away. But how could you get the sliotar from the corner and put it all the way to the centre of the goal? Like, that's just kamikaze stuff. It was really, really poor. And even the Limerick game, they did perform well in the first half, but they needed to maintain that energy for the last 5 minutes. The fact is, they didn't. They weren't brave enough to do it, and they dropped one up front. And that was just, it was just poor tactics, to be honest with you, Aaron. And what I will throw back at you, do you think it's kind of embarrassing for Galway that they haven't won an Leinster Championship since 2018? Because even looking at that stat, it's kind of alarming. If I was a Galway fan and look at that stat, I'd be thinking, what has happened?
Yeah, like I wouldn't necessarily say embarrassing as such, but I think it is a major disappointment. That goes without question. And Galway have had some very questionable defeats in that time. On 2 occasions they lost to Dublin. 2022, I think, 2021 and 2019 they lost to Dublin in the Leinster Championship. And that for me, like Dublin, for me, like that's been the only big games Dublin have won in the last 8-9 years. Do you know what I mean? Like so. But like if you want to count Wexford wins, fair enough. But so yeah, like I think there is definitely a case there for Galway. I think they have underperformed a lot of the time, and I think maybe they're clinging on to a lot more of their more experienced players. I think that's the problem with Galway, is that you've got Conor Whelan who's shooting the lights out, but you've still got Conor Cooney. You've had a bunch of younger lads who've kind of been in and around the panel the last few years, but none of them have really sort of like really took their claim into the Galway side. Like when you look at Gerard O'Connor as an example with Tipperary, he's come into that team and just ripped it up straight away. And even some of the Limerick lads, when they're coming in, the likes of Donncha O'Dowling and Michael Houlihan and all these lads, they're coming in and doing a phenomenal job. So I think that maybe is the problem for Galway, is that the younger lads who've been coming in haven't really been able to make a big impact. And maybe it could be partly down to the fact that outside managers maybe aren't aware of the underage players and the talents that they have and their strengths and their weaknesses. So, you know, it could be a fair point.
Yeah, definitely. And that probably epitomises the point more. They need an inside manager. And it's worked for Galway over the last few seasons, with especially John McIntyre, Anthony Cunningham, and Micheál Donoghue. Especially with Donoghue. Donoghue was the one who won that All-Ireland title in 2017. So why do you change it? I actually don't know. It's really, really poor. And Seamus made a good point as well. Fair play to him in this. There's counties go for outside managers if they think they're a bit off an All-Ireland. If you're putting Galway at 6 and 5, they're clearly not a million miles off an All-Ireland. So why are they going for outside managers? And as well as that, Henry Shefflin, if he goes into the Kilkenny job, I know Derek Ling's doing a good job at the moment, but it is possible. If Henry Shefflin goes into the Kilkenny job in the next few years, he's going to know everything that is to know about these young Galway players. The likes of Gavin Lee, the likes of Tom Monaghan, the likes of Evan Nyland. Why on earth would Galway appoint him in the first place? I'm kind of positive about the appointment of Henry Shefflin in the first few seasons, but as it's gone on, I'm thinking, why are Galway doing this? You know, you have inside managers. If you want to go for a legend in hurling, go for someone like Joe Canning, Fergal Moore, or I'm trying to think, even one of the Burks if they ever retired. Go for them. There's no need to go for a legend from another county that is and nonetheless your biggest rival in Leinster. Why would you do it? I honestly, it's kind of clicked for me over the last year or so since Seamus said it, but it's definitely clicked now. And what I will say as well, last point of Galway, the 2021 defeat against Dublin was particularly alarming, because I remember, I think Seamus and yourself talked about this, in Croke Park with 6 minutes gone on the clock. 6 minutes. It wasn't 6 minutes to go. It was 6 minutes gone. Joe Canning puts the ball down for a free and he goes for goal, showing a bit of arrogance there that they think, oh, we're much better than Dublin. We're going to wipe you, lads. And Dublin end up beating them anyway in Croke Park. So, like, I think their attitude is another thing as well. Maybe that's sorted under Henry Shefflin, but that's a sort of element that would make them probably close to the likes of Limerick, Tip, and all them, and probably one of the reasons I'd have Cork above Galway at this particular moment in time.
Crackety Ash says here, Kevin Cooney injury was a fair hit to Galway. Kevin Cooney had developed a lot in the last couple of years. Yeah, it is a fair point in fairness. And yeah, maybe someone like Matty Kenny mightn't be a bad show for Galway. You know, obviously done a very good job with Dublin. And maybe he could be I was kind of surprised he didn't get the job, to be honest. Or like maybe he was in the running at the time, but or then again, I think Henry Shefflin actually had already possibly already come in at that point. But I definitely think Matty Kenny could be a good manager. In fairness, just going back to this, I know you were chatting a little bit about Wexford being above Dublin. I think my reasoning for that, to be honest with you, is I think both sides are very static in many ways. Like, I think Dublin have gotten the better of Wexford on a good couple of occasions in the last few years. But I think Wexford at the same time, it's mainly been down to them underperforming, if I'm being honest. Like, when we saw Wexford at their best when they beat Kilkenny last year, even in a couple of opening games this year in the league, like the draw against Kilkenny, and I think Wexford just have a bit more coming through. Like with Corey Byrne Dunbar, Keane Byrne, I think has been very good as well. And I think there's just a little bit more there for Keith Rossiter with Wexford to work with, as opposed to Dublin. But again, like, you could argue it's very little maybe between them teams, and I think ultimately, like, it will be the fight for the third place when it comes to the Leinster Championship. Looking at 5-1, so in 5 it's Galway, 4 is Tipperary, Clare third, Kilkenny second, Limerick in first. I'd imagine you probably agree with this as well, considering you had Galway 6th, so maybe you'd have Cork in 5th instead. But Tipperary, first of all, like thoughts on Tipperary so far this year? I think they've been very impressive.
I think they have as well, and I think they have some very good young players. Like you talked about Garrod O'Connor earlier in the chat, and for him to do it in two different competitions is one thing as well. To do it in the Alliance League and do it in the Fitzgibbon, game in, game out. Like he scored, I think it was 8 points for you against UCC on the Wednesday or Thursday night during the week. And then on the Sunday against Galway, he scores 113. He's just a brilliant player, brilliant a bit of fresh air for Tipperary hurling, and is very good for UL in fairness in the Fitzgibbon Cup. Jake Morris is taking the captaincy this year, and he's an excellent player, goal getter from last year. Mark Keogh is a good player. Alan Tynan. They still have the likes of the McGraths there. Bonner Marr is still going. He's still not retired as of yet. So, and Liam Cahill, look, he's a good manager. I know a few Tip fans were questioning his methods last year, but he's still a good coach. And what I will say, well, it would be interesting to see. He was in the squad over the last few games, but Billy Seymour for Killadangan. He scored 2 goals and 76 points across the club championship. It will be interesting to see if Liam Cahill actually picks him in the team or picks him on the bench to have, a backup option coming on. It's because Tip has a very good forwards, even rolling names off the sheet there. Garrod O'Connor, Jake Morris, Billy Seymour, Mark Keogh, Sean Ryan. There's some very good players in Tipperary. So I think they're well worthy of a place in fourth. There, Reece Shelley's a good goalkeeper as well. So, and I don't know, Cathal Barr going to come back to the team. He's a well needed, experienced player. So, yeah, I think Tip are well suited to being in fourth place, but just take the need to break the stranglehold of being in the top three among the likes of the Kilkennys, the Clares, and Limericks. And I think they might do in the next few years with Garrod O'Connor or Jake Morris, all them developing because they are excellent hurlers. Even look at the top three, I probably just about would agree with you on Kilkenny above Clare, just because Kilkenny have beaten Clare over the last 2 seasons. Clare need to beat Kilkenny in the championship to get above them. If you're looking for player to player, I think Clare have a better team than Kilkenny. There's no doubt about it. Mark Rogers, Tony Kelly, Shane O'Donnell, Sean Rinn at midfield was really, really good now the last day. Peter Duggan, David Fitzgerald. There's some very good names rolling off the sheet there. Adam Hogan at cornerback is an excellent player as well. It's just a mentality thing with Clare. Once they get to the semi-finals, they need to win these sorts of pressure cooker games. The first year against Kilkenny, they were hammered off the park. 24 wides, I remember that stat specifically. That was terrible from Clare. Really, really bad performance. And then last year, I think it was just moments that didn't get them over the line against Kilkenny. The goal in particular for Owen Cody, when Andrew Quilligan decided to poke the ball short. I think someone lost the ball around the D area. Kilkenny turned the ball over back in the net. And even like there was some instances, I think Richie Hogan was running down the line, Dermot Ryan coming in, and all you have to do is stand them up. But Richie Hogan goes past them, concedes a free, another easy point for Kilkenny. And Clare might point towards referee decisions over the last few seasons against Limerick and Kilkenny, but even the stats would tell you, and I wrote a lot of pieces on Balt.ie because of this, check them out if you haven't already, on the Limerick Clare game last year and the Kilkenny Clare game. It wasn't because of the referee that you didn't get over the line. It was the statistics, the wides, the key moments in the game, the turnover count, some decision making as well. Like even putting Shane Amori as a sweeper against Kilkenny last year was baffling. It was almost like Clare couldn't deal with Kilkenny's power, where Kilkenny do have good players and Derek Ling is a good coach. But with the players that Clare have, they should be going for Kilkenny's throat. There's no doubt about it. And I think they got a bit scared last year and decided to play the sweeper. But I think they should, brush them insecurities out of their system in many ways. Kilkenny, look, against Limerick over the last 2 seasons, they have been very close against them. And they have some good players like TJ Reid, Owen Cody, Adrian Mullins, probably one of the most underrated players in the country. And they do have a very good team all across the board. Derek Ling's a good coach as well. Owen Murphy's the best goalkeeper in the country. Probably you could argue Nicky Quaid. There's a real argument there, but he's absolutely exceptionally Mikey Butler. And Hugh Lawler in the full backline as well. Paddy Deegan from O'Loughlin Gaels is very, very good. And David Blanchfield is another good halfback to have in your team. So Kilkenny do still have players to go up another level. And I think one's obvious, Aaron, isn't it? Limerick. And I think everybody will say it. They are going for history this year, the Drive for Five. They are an unbelievable team. And to be honest with you, I don't think they're going to be stopped this year.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Like, to be fair, I think a few teams have taken good bites out of Limerick in the last few years. But I think the thing about Limerick is that they always just stand up and find an answer. Like, no matter who's injured, no matter how many points they're down, like they've overcome every single obstacle in the last 4 years. And like a few of them have been big obstacles as well. Like, they've been put in some difficult situations, and I think people do forget that. I think a lot of people maybe sometimes have the idea in their head that Limerick have just waltzed through, like they did in the 2021 All Ireland final. Sorry to remind you, but like I do think a lot of the time it's been very close. In fairness, Crackety Ash says Tip look like they're well placed to get to a Munster final this year. And Raymond was saying here, surely we haven't reached the Tip are going to win the All Ireland phase already this year. Well, yeah. Look, I think to be fair, I think we both think Limerick are going to win anyway. So it's not necessarily a slight on Tipperary, but like looking at that, like Kilkenny, Clare, I suppose we know what they bring, obviously over the last few years. But is there like who do you think is the closest challenger to Limerick? Because like you would say Kilkenny or Clare, but I feel like we know what Kilkenny or Clare offer at this stage, and it hasn't been able to beat Limerick. I know like Clare beat Limerick in in the Munster round robin last year, but it didn't beat them in the Munster final when it matters. Like, I don't know, could Cork, Galway, Tipperary? Like I feel like those teams, maybe Cork and Tipperary I look at particular because I'd be like, maybe they can throw something different at Limerick as opposed to Clare and Kilkenny. What do you think?
It's definitely a good point to make there. And the fact is, as well, Tipperary, most people actually forget this because Limerick went on and won the All Ireland in the end and the Munster Championship. But Tip drew against Limerick last year and were
Yeah.
arguably the better team on that day in Semple Stadium. So, but the fact is, and he mentioned it with Limerick there, they've overcome every challenge, and that was one of them against Tipperary last year. They were under the cosh for so many parts of that game. They had a guy sent off at Barry Nash. They still got the draw out of that game what they needed. In the last Munster game last year against Cork, Cork had 77% shot accuracy against them. It was almost perfection. From a Cork point of view, Limerick still won it. And they won it with flying colours as well. The semi-final against Galway providing the late rally in 2020 or 2022, should I say. Limerick still beat them against Clare. Clare probably produced, in particular 2022, produced one of the best Munster final performances that I've ever seen from a Clare team. And Limerick still beat them. Clare brought them to extra time. Tony Kelly getting that sideline. Limerick still go on and win it. And even the stat I was checking on doing a piece for Limerick Voice and stuff like that, checking the website account already on that Kilkenny actually in 2022 scored the biggest total from an All Ireland final losing team, 226. Limerick still scored 131 and beat them. So, and in that final as well, Kilkenny had a shot accuracy of 72%, and Limerick still beat them. 2023, they were 4 points down after Paddy Deegan's brilliant goal in that All Ireland final. Limerick looked on the ropes. They still score, I think, the next 19 points and beat them. Like, it's just unbelievable from a Limerick point of view. They're just a generational team. They're probably one of the best teams I've ever seen because of the fact that you mentioned there. They've overcome nearly every obstacle thrown in front of them. And even another example in 2021 against Tipperary, they were miles behind at halftime. I think it was 10 points at halftime in Park Keith that year. And they still come back and win it. They're never dead. You can never write Limerick off at any stage of a game. Even if they're down 10 to 15 points, they'll always find a way to come back into the game. And that's what makes great champions. They are a brilliant team, there's no doubt about it. I think it's a very good point to make about Cork and Tipperary. Like, even with the underage that's there, especially in Cork, like the minors, the under-20s, Cork should be challenging Limerick. I don't think so now, but I think if Cork build the team in the next few years, with, let's just say, Kieran Joyce centre-back, Ben Cunningham up on the forwards, Colin O'Brien maybe could come in. He's done well for Barry in the Fitzgibbon Cup and has done well for Avondhu in the Cork Championship. He could come into the team. If Dara Fitzgibbon improves, if Darragh O'Leary comes into fullback, if Ryan Saunderson goes into goal for Middleton, I think Cork have a huge chance of overcoming Limerick. Like, even look at the under-20 panel today, that was named on the Cork GA website. you still have the likes of Dermot Healy and William Buckley on there. And William Buckley is one of the St. Finbarr's best players. He's one of UCC's best players in the Fitzgibbon Cup, and he's still under 20. So he has potential to rise up through the ranks as well. Jack O'Connor is a speedy player on the wing. Cathal McCarthy, it'll be interesting to see him at cornerback from the Sarsfields club. Tim O'Mahony is a good player. But it'd be interesting to see if Pat Ryan can build the team. And actually, somebody from Cork actually said to me, I think a month ago at this stage, if Pat Ryan can't change Cork's fortunes in hurling, no one will. Because he's a brilliant coach. And under 20 level, at underage level, at his club Sarsfields, he's a brilliant coach. He's a brilliant man manager. And he's the guy to try and change Cork's fortunes. But right as now, I can't see anybody stopping Limerick. But this year in particular, I think in the next few years, Tip and Cork will be interested to see how they develop and challenge Limerick. But for right now, I think Clare and Kilkenny are still the closest challengers to Limerick, as I know. If I was to choose one team to go beat them, maybe I would have to say Clare, because of the fact they beat them last year in the Gaelic rounds. But again, it's a close one to call.
Yeah, like to be honest, I if I had to say it, I'd say Cork would be the team to end Limerick's domination. But I don't think it happens this year. I think it happens maybe next year, maybe even the year after that, if I'm being honest. But in terms of right now, like the team that I think can maybe give them the best game probably is Clare, because Clare obviously beat them in the Munster round robin. They've had a very few close Munster finals, in fairness. Kilkenny obviously were very close 2 years ago, but I just think Kilkenny have given everything and haven't been able to get over the line against Limerick. Like, I mean, maybe with the likes of Billy Drennan, David Blanchfield coming in for Kilkenny, like, could that maybe give them a bit of an emphasis? Like, obviously Billy Drennan was injured for the final last year. Could that maybe just sort of kick Kilkenny on a bit further, do you think?
Even the O'Loughlin Gaels players, like, more of them to come in. Like Luke Hogan, for example, at full forward. There are some good players there, Conor Heary as well. There are good players in Kilkenny, there's no doubt about that. But I definitely agree with you. I think they're at the kitchen sink at this stage. Like, they had their chance last year. That was a huge chance after Paddy Egan's goal. I think they went 4-5 clear at that point of the game. And they just didn't close it out. And that was a huge chance missed for Kilkenny. But Clare, you mentioned a Cork of good youngsters and typical good youngsters. Most people outside of Clare actually believe that they don't have youngsters coming through. But I will put up a few stats here. They won the minor championship last year in the All-Irelands. Like, Art Skull Rish had Limerick School, actually, in Munster Schools hurling, have a huge bulk of Clare players. Michael Collins and Mark O'Brien are two of them in particular. You have Keith Smith coming through the under-20s. There are some good players in Clare. There's no doubt about that. Adam Hogan is still 19, 20 years of age. And he performed excellent last year. So I think Clare do have youngsters, even past the likes of Tony Kelly, Shane O'Donnell, etc. And even the likes of Sean Rinn at midfield now the last day was absolutely superb. Dermot Ryan's still a young player. He's still playing Fitzgibbon Cup for Mary I. So, like, there are some good players in Clare. There's good young players there. I don't think they'll close the gap on Limerick in terms of winning the All-Ireland this year. But disappointed so far in the league. Hopefully look, I wouldn't be too despondent after Kilkenny and Clare. Look, we'll see how we get on against Offaly, Wexford, Waterford. That'll be the real test for Cork. But in terms of Clare, I do think there are some good youngsters coming through, particularly in minor level. They beat Galway in that All-Ireland minor final quite comprehensively last year. And when you look at the likes of Dermot Stritch there from Clonlara, he was in the Art Skull Rish schools team as well. Like, Clare do have young players. They do have winning young players coming through. It's just a question, once Clare make the breakthrough, will Brian Lowe be above them? I'm kind of unsure of that because of the fact that Limerick are that good, but we'll have to see over the next few seasons. But I will say this to anybody that is writing off Clare and is putting Cork and Tip on the pedestal to challenge Limerick. Do not write off the banner just yet.
Yeah, no, it probably is a bit of a myth about Clare, to be fair, because even Mark Rodgers, when he's come into the team in the last few years, has been absolutely sensational. So maybe I think it's one of them things where Clare have had a lot of bad results in the last few years at under 20 level, like few disappointing results, but they are still pulling players through. Like, they are still getting players into their team. They're maybe not having the same level of underage success as the likes of Cork, Tipperary, even Limerick to a certain extent. But there certainly is players coming through Clare, in fairness. Raymond says here, Limerick's championship games are close when there was no Keane Lynch or less than match fit Keane Lynch. Limerick are at least 5 or 6 points a better team with a match fit Keane Lynch. I do agree they certainly are a better team with Keane Lynch, but the only thing is, like, Limerick did still win the All-Ireland in 2022 when Keane Lynch was injured. So, you know, and I still think Limerick are a much better side with Keane Lynch, but they just always find it. They always find a way. Like, even if Declan Hannon's injured, you know, previous years when Tom Morrissey's been out, like they've always seemed to find an answer, and it's testament to John Coyley, testament to Paul Kinnerk. A2 says Limerick flipped a switch in that Munster final against Tipperary a few years ago. Whatever was said in that dressing room, they found another gear and always seem to find it when they're pushed. Teams play out 100% and still lose to them, feel absolutely unstoppable. Yeah, like that's exactly the point, isn't it? And like with Limerick, like you nearly feel like the best time to beat Limerick is in that Munster round robin when they're not like fully there, because like you would argue like Limerick probably didn't really click into gear probably until maybe Munster final, All-Ireland semi-final. Even when they were going behind against Galway, like I feel like that was really when they clicked into gear last year.
Definitely so. And I just think, particularly in the Munster round robin, and a lot of Cork fans were saying that they were close to Limerick and things like that. And I was saying, look, we have to calm down a bit, lads. Limerick were still in third, fourth gear. They weren't completely in fifth gear. They were just, you know, going through the boat. And that was enough for Limerick to get over the line at that point. But when they needed to click in the gear, they did so. And they did so in that Munster final against Clare. Clare almost beat them with that last bit of free. For record, I think it was a free at the end for Clare, but they had a huge amount of misses in that game, and they can only blame themselves for that. But Limerick, once they click into gear, they're almost, and as the comment said, they're unstoppable. There's no doubt about that. They're just an incredible team. They're a generational team. And honestly, I know a lot of people say it's recency bias and all that. I think this is the greatest team in hurling history. I know Kilkenny were there in the 2000s, in the late 2000s, but a point worth noting as well. And Seamus brought up this a year ago on my All-Ireland final preview on my own podcast. He said that Kilkenny had it easy in Leinster. Let's be honest. Like, until Galway came in, you had the likes of Wexford, Dublin, Offaly, who weren't really putting it up to Kilkenny the way that they'd hoped to. Limerick have been thrown in at everything, really. You looked at, say, Cork, Tip, Waterford, Clare. Waterford produced a brilliant performance in the Gaelic grounds a couple of years ago as well. Worth noting that as well. Like, it's every team has shown everything at this Limerick team, and they still get over the line. And they're just an incredible team in many ways. Like, no disrespect to those Leinster counties back then, but Kilkenny only need to click into gear once they reach All-Ireland semi-final stage. Limerick have had to click into gear when it's in the Munster round robin or the latter stages of the Munster round robin and the Munster final. That epitomises an unbelievable team. And even though I was doing averages there for statistics on a piece there, just it was going to be completed in the next few weeks. Kilkenny, their average winning margin in that period between 06 and 09 in the Leinster Championship was 12.5 points. Limerick's margin of victory, or margin of games, including the draws and the loss to Clare in Munster between 2020 and 2023, was 4 points. Despite the fact that Limerick are an unbelievable team, that's a tight margin in hurling. That's 4 points. Literally a goal on a point, which would happen in a flash. So, like, Limerick have had it hard in Munster. They've had it hard. Everything's been thrown at them. Whereas that Kilkenny team, no disrespect to them now, but they've had it a bit too easy in Leinster those sorts of years. And Limerick, they're just an unbelievable team. And I will say this, Aaron, I think they're one of the greatest of all time, if not already.
Yeah, no, I do agree. Like, I mean, it's one of them. They've already equaled what Kilkenny have done in terms of four All-Irelands in a row. They've obviously won 5 Munsters in a row. You know, you win another Munster, it'd be like that's 6 in a row. I think that's the record broke then, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, because I think 5 in a row, I think, was the record, I think, previously. So I think they will break that record, and then obviously they win the 5 in a row, which obviously is a record as well. So I don't think there'll be any disputing it. I don't think there'll be any disputing at that stage. And like, it's one of them. Like Limerick, they could even break Dublin's 6 in a row record. You know.
Yeah. Oh, they could. And I said this to you, Aaron, on previous podcasts last year. Be afraid. They're on the road to doing it. I'm telling you, they are just an unstoppable team at this stage. And even with some absentees, he even listed the young players coming through at the start of the podcast. Adam English, Donegal Dalek, Shane O'Brien is another one who's an excellent player for Mary Owen Fitzgibbon Cup. Like you have Micheál Houlihan from Kilmallock. Like you have some excellent players there. What's even more frightening, John Coyley announced last week that Sean Finn is back to full fitness and is ready for the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Not what anybody wants to hear. It really isn't. And when you looked at over last year, Sean Finn was missing for the majority of last year, and the latter stage, the crunch stages of the championship, and Limerick still coped without him. They still have Mike Casey at full back. They still had the likes of Barry Nash performing well. You still had Dan Morrissey. This is just an unbelievable team, an unbelievable squad, and I think they're just going to win the 5 in a row this year, aren't they? They're just an incredible side.
Yeah, I think so. It's very, very hard to see anyone stop Limerick. And I think if we do these power rankings towards the end of the year, like maybe some counties will interchange and some counties will swap over. But I think it's very, very hard to see Limerick stopping. Well, cheers anyone who tuned into the stream. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. There'll be a football preview out tomorrow at some stage. And yeah, let us know in the comments down below what's your power rankings from 18 to 1. We'll run through them all maybe quickly before we finish up again. So Kildare in 18th, Meath 17th, Kerry in 16th, Down in 15th, Laois 14th, Offaly 13th, Carlow 12th, and Westmeath are 11th. We've got Antrim in 10th, Dublin 9th, Wexford 8th, Waterford 7th, and Cork in 6th. And then Galway 5th, Tipperary 4th, Clare 3rd, Kilkenny 2nd, and Limerick 1st. So yeah, Matthew, cheers very much for coming on the show. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And we will speak to you all soon.